Tuesday, May 10th, 2016 started out like any ordinary day. Students went to school, parents headed to work, and the day began moving along. The atmosphere wasn't really favorable for a big tornado outbreak, but many in Mayfield learned later on that afternoon that the atmosphere doesn't have to be right for a tornado to form. By 2:45 p.m. Central Time, the National Weather Service in Paducah issued a tornado warning for central Graves County, Kentucky, including the city of Mayfield. By that time, there was already a tornado on the ground headed straight for Central Elementary School. At 2:49 p.m., the tornado was crossing 121, and it was at that time that many watched the tornado take a slight left turn towards Grandpa's attic. At approximately 2:51 p.m., the tornado was going right behind the Graves County High School and Middle School. All three schools together contain close to 1,700 students and faculty. At 2:54 p.m., the tornado was crossing Highway 45, taking out homes and businesses such as Bennett Motors and Youngblood's RVs. It's approximately 2:59 p.m. when the tornado starts to re-strengthen as it crosses State Route 131, Carlisle Road, and Spence Chapel Road. The tornado is growing larger by the time it meets the Kentucky Purchase Parkway at 3:12 p.m., ripping asphalt from the road. Graves County is in the clear at 3:14 p.m. when the tornado begins to move into Marshall County, Kentucky. The tornado is now moving straight for Benton, Kentucky. Right before it gets to the southwestern suburbs of Benton, the tornado lifts off of the ground and dissipates. The storm is still being watched because meanwhile the tornado is off the ground, but there is still strong rotation in the storm. Forecasters watch the storm lift over the lakes, and then the tornado touches back down in Lyon County, Kentucky around 3:45 p.m. As the evening of May 10th continues on, 7 other tornadoes form in the Shawnee National Forest in southern Illinois, Morganfield, Kentucky, and Christian County, Kentucky, which contains the city of Hopkinsville. But it was the aftermath that hit people the hardest. Meteorologists now have the ability to put a track on a tornado when it's on the ground to see where it's going. Before the tornado crossed 121, meteorologists and forecasters put the track on, and disbelief went through their minds. The track was headed straight for Central Elementary School. Teachers and students didn't know this at the time. 400 students and faculty were inside that school when the tornado was on the ground. School was letting out at the time when the tornado hit, but teachers pulled students back in when they were informed that a tornado was headed for the school. Police and sheriffs were stationed all around the school watching the tornado move towards Central. Thoughts and prayers were going out to students and teachers amongst that 400. Graves County Sheriff Dwayne Redmond states, "I watched that tornado take a left turn. That left turn took the tornado towards Grandpa's attic seconds before coming upon Central Elementary. The tornado then slammed into Grandpa's attic, destroying almost everything in its path. Semis in the back parking lot were overturned, and AC units were ripped from the building and thrown into the field behind the store. One building that was right beside Grandpa's attic was moved completely off of its foundation, and all of the debris from that building was piled up. All that was left of that building was a slab of concrete. Some of the metal roofing from the store was found in trees across the field. Debris as of Sunday, May 15th, was still laying on the other side of the field. The tornado even left packages from inside the building still laying on its shelves exposed to the outside, going to show how powerful the winds were right beside those packages, but yet the winds didn't even touch them. The only thing that happened to Central was that the doors were opening and closing on their own due to pressure changes. The tornado continues to move right behind Graves County High School and Middle School before it starts to hit Highway 45. There were 1,500 students and faculty inside the high school, and students report the windows rattling, but the tornado ends up keeping all windows intact. Students at the middle school don't report any windows rattling or doors opening and closing. The power went out in all 3 schools, putting the students into panic modes. They start calling their parents, telling them to come and pick them up. That then puts parents in danger. Teachers at all 3 schools were watching the tornado move right past them out their windows while kids in the dark were screaming and shouting for safety. Administrators at all 3 schools claim that is the most terrified they've ever been and the closest that they've ever been to a tornado. Daniel Catlin, a 7th grade math teacher at the middle school, shares his experience on how the tornado affected him at the school.
Well, as everything was going down, they came over to the PA and were telling us to essentially go to our tornado locations and escort the kids there. And at first, I'm figuring out it's just a drill. And then as I get out into the hallway, I'm telling the kids, hey, this is our room, I'm telling them where to go. I noticed there's kind of more of a sense of urgency from the other teachers. And as the kids are walking downstairs, I'm seeing Mr. Johnson just running and hollering, saying, get to your location, get there, this is not a drill. And at that moment, that's really hit me, that this was serious, that something was about to go down. And I think from that point, too, the kids saw his reaction and the other teachers and how serious they were. They got moving a little quicker, and we got to our locations. I mean, it was hot. There was a lot of us in there. But we were somewhere that was the safest place we could be during that time, which is what was all we can ask for during that. And thank God that it didn't hit us directly, and it passed by, and nobody was hurt during that time.
The storm crosses Highway 45, destroying businesses and homes. One house on Wayne Drive had hard metal wrapped around a tree 5 times. Insulation covered the ground and streets. Trailers were shredded apart and debris populated the ground. Trees were uprooted, limbs were thrown into people's houses, and power lines were dispersed amongst the ground. The tornado continued its trek parallel to the Purchase Parkway, destroying and flattening a barn, even in the tornado's weakest moment in a field with roofing from it still in a nearby tree as of May 18, 2016. Once the tornado met the convergence of State Route 131, Carlisle Road, and Spence Chapel Road, it began to re-strengthen. Amber Key, an 8th grade science teacher at the Graves County Middle School, whose house was hit by the tornado, lives at that convergence. She shares her story of when she found out that her home was hit and the thoughts going through her mind when being informed this information.
Well, it took me a while to find out for sure what was going on at my house. I was here at school and trying to text back and forth with my husband. He works in Paducah. He had no idea anything was going on. I texted him, called mom and dad, and the baby was with them. As soon as he got that message from me, he headed to our house. This was probably about 3:30, 4 o'clock. He kept texting me, go to your mom and dad's, just go to your mom and dad's. I can't get to the house. He had tried going down the main road to get to our house. He couldn't get there. So he turned around and tried some of the back roads. He ended up going back behind our house, the road behind our house, and it was blocked. So he had to help the electric people clear the road, and he probably didn't get there till about 5 o'clock, 5:30. He called me. I was at my mom and dad's house already. I could hear it in his voice. He said, "Let me talk to your dad." I said, okay. At that point, I knew it probably wasn't real good. And so I was kind of being nosy and listening. And my dad said, well, do you have a lot of damage? He said, well, yeah. And when my husband talks like that, it's probably pretty serious. So in my head, I was thinking, okay, the house is gone. I don't know. That's the only thing I could think of is the house is gone. Or it's really bad. So about that time, my dad and I left their house and we went over to our house, to my house. And the whole way I was thinking, do I have a house? Do I have a house? In the back of my head, I was thinking, I hope my cats are okay, but that wasn't the important part. And so as we started to top the hill up to the house, I looked. I kind of had my eyes closed and I kind of looked, and I saw the house standing. But okay, that's good. We have a house. But there were trees everywhere. The driveway was covered in trees. The backyard was covered in trees. All I could see was our shop at the end of the driveway that was halfway gone. But at the same time, I thought in my head, okay, we can deal with this. It's not too bad. Maybe it can be fixed. We'll just kind of have to see. And the funny thing was the whole time, or I think it's funny now, but all I could say was, oh my God, oh my God. I walked around the yard, oh my God, because I didn't know what else to say. Never been through anything like this before. And it was just kind of a shock. It was nothing I've ever dealt with. And me and my husband just kind of stood there in the driveway. And we were like, now what? So that's when my dad came in handy. He's like, okay, here we go. We're going to fix the roof. We're going to cover the roof up. We're going to do this. Other than that, me and my husband would have just probably sat down in the driveway and been like, oh, this sucks. But it all is going to work out. We had it so much better than many other people did who lost everything. So we're thankful. And now we're just going to go on and make the best of it that we can now.
The tornado hit her house, scattering trees and limbs all across her yard, destroying a shed in her backyard, poking a limb inside her house, taking off roofing, stones embedded into the side of the house, and chunks of fencing close to her driveway. Kathy Griffith, a school bus driver for Simpsonia Elementary School, was headed northbound on State Route 131 when she almost came in contact with the tornado. What we learned was that her bus was parked at Trace Creek Baptist Church when the head of the Graves County Bus Garage came over the radio telling her to get to the 131 exit ramp to the Purchase Parkway as soon as possible. She didn't like the idea of going in that direction because she could see the tornado moving closer towards that area that they were telling her to go towards. She said that she immediately booked it towards the exit ramp. She began to see the tornado across a field to her right, headed straight for her bus, which had students on it. As of what she described, screaming for their mommies and terrified out of their minds. Griffith was in shock and in disbelief of the tornado because she had never seen one before in her life. She was watching the tornado moving closer to her as she was moving closer to it. She said that as soon as she crossed the same hill that Amber Key was talking about, she looked up and saw a cop waving her to come on. And right when she met up with the cop, she looked in her rear view mirror and watched the tornado miss her bus by about 30 to 50 yards. She stated after the tornado that her kids on that bus came first and that she was more scared about them rather than herself. Spence Chapel Road was where the tornado followed along for the next few minutes. The tornado was beginning to re-strengthen at this point. It took off the entire second level of a home that belonged to the Scotts. The house right next to them was almost flattened. Only 2 walls were left standing, which later got burned down. The house across from that house had trees down in the yard and items scattered about. It also destroyed half of a house on a nearby hill behind that home. The tornado then moves closer to the Purchase Parkway, eventually crossing into oncoming traffic. The tornado ripped asphalt from the ground and slung it into the air. Right after it crosses the parkway, it moves into Marshall County, doing little damage. It starts to weaken as it moves into Benton, Kentucky, then lifts off of the ground, crossing the Kentucky lakes and dams, which contain millions of dollars in infrastructure. The tornadic storm races towards Princeton, Kentucky, gaining strength once again. People begin to watch funnel clouds form, then eyewitnesses report a tornado forming close to the Princeton area in Lyon County, Kentucky. The tornado doesn't stay on the ground very long before lifting back into the clouds. It did little to no damage in Lyon County. God worked many miracles that day. The tornado was headed straight for Central, but took a left turn, missing them by 150 yards. It missed the high school and middle school by a mere 300 yards. The tornado ran parallel to the Purchase Parkway by 100 yards. That was 100 yards from staying on the parkway for several minutes, possibly tossing up occupied vehicles that would have been traveling down that stretch of road. The tornado went right over Amber Key's house, seconds before re-strengthening. If the tornado re-strengthened 5 to 10 seconds earlier, it would have flattened her home. Highway 301, a home close to Highway 301 in Graves County, was hit by the tornado, and the residents of that home found their son's graduation jacket stuck in a tree in Marshall County, miles away. The tornado was classified as an EF3 tornado, which means that winds were anywhere between 136 to 165 miles per hour. That means that if winds were 35 to 64 mile per hour or greater, and the tornado was only 150 to 300 more yards to the right, then it would have flattened Central Elementary School, the Graves County High School, and Middle School, killing just a little less than 1,700 people. It missed the Jackson Purchase Medical Center by 700 yards. The tornado came close to hitting Trace Creek Baptist Church by around 2 miles and missed Spence Chapel Baptist Church by less than a quarter mile. No one in the entire episode of the tornado was killed. Only 10 injuries were reported. Kathy Griffith's bus was missed by 30 yards by the tornado. Shyla Chalker of Mayfield found a Bible in the debris, and she also found a cross sitting upright amongst the rubble. Many believe that was a sign that God was there before, during, and after the tornado. Many state that He had His hand on those little children at Central Elementary. God was watching over everything. Yes, there were loss to businesses and homes, but God started using random strangers minutes after the tornado hit to start rebuilding on those areas. You can rebuild those homes, but you can't rebuild lives. The community came first to many people, and volunteer work was already beginning soon after. The city of Mayfield is building itself back together. One puzzle piece is being placed into the picture at a time. The community is knitting itself closer with each passing day. There were miracles worked around the clock on Tuesday, May 10th, 2016. It's a day that many will look back on and never forget of everything that happened that day. There is one big thing that is good, and that is that the city of Mayfield is better than it has ever been before. I'm Jacob Woods for the Mayfield, Kentucky Tornado Documentary.